Hey KBC, this is Taylor Mason with Judy Ewalt. We're here to share a little story that Judy wanted to provide for you to maybe help anyone in the church that might be going through something similar or might encounter something similar. Before we get into that, Judy, why don't you just share a little bit about yourself and how long you've been a part of the church for people that might not know.
I've written myself some notes so I can speed this up. I came to KBC in the spring of 1981 as a brand new Christian, a baby Christian, faith at midlife. I was baptized later that year by an interim pastor right here, and then I had 6 years of rapid growth in Christ through Bible study fellowship and Kirkwood Baptist members of our faith family caring for me. I did a lot of personal Bible study and had some wonderful mission opportunities. I also got called as a deacon after a few years. In 1987, the Lord called me into some pastoral capacity with various trainings ahead. I didn't know what that was going to be about, but about 10 years later, I was, after some study and some new experiences, I was called to Delmar Baptist as an associate pastor with senior adults and homebound. So I stayed in that capacity for 3 years and then resigned because my missionary kids were coming home and it was time to give them the extra attention. And so I stayed on there. And then after about an additional 5 years there, I returned to KBC in 2007 in a time of recovery from a serious depression and a divorce. The Lord brought me all through these trials and marvelously re-energized me in a new single life. The summer of 2021 brought me a new difficulty, a situation. I'll let Taylor preface this story I told him a few weeks back regarding sharing this with you possibly in hopes that it can help even a couple persons not fall into this trap.
Yeah, so Judy came to me, like you said, about probably a month ago or so, and said, you know, there's something that happened in my life last summer that I feel like I need to share that might help other people in the church. And she said, you know, I really feel like I want to share it in a little video. And I said, well, I think we can make that happen. So we're putting this together so that you as a church community might hear Judy's story. And I know you're quite, like, this is not easy to do, and I find it very wise and noble and caring of you to provide this when a lot of these stories and experiences can be very difficult to share because of what happened. So can you talk to us a little bit about what happened back in 2021?
Yes. In June of 2021, I started to be scammed. And of course, I didn't know that was what was happening. I shared some significant financial losses over the next couple of months. And I share these things with you in hopes that some others of you won't be taken in. The tactics scammers often use are to scare and create fear in a person. A lawyer calls or summons you by letter, and what's this all about? And a phone call comes in, a relative's been arrested and needs you to send money for bail. Some women meet a new personable friend online and then are asked very soon about would they send them money, they're needing this or that. And so my story is that I received a phone call in June from a drug enforcement agency officer in El Paso, Texas. He ID'd himself and gave me this badge number and inquired if I had recently lived or been in Texas or using a credit card there or spent significant amounts of money. I answered truthfully to those things. And then he said, well, I'm sorry to report, but there's a warrant out for your arrest for drug trafficking and money laundering. And he gave me my Social Security account number, at least part of it. I don't recall at this point. But that my Social Security number had been compromised, and they had it, and of course the fear just shot up. And so the procedure that he told me that the Drug Enforcement Agency required when this kind of a thing happened. You know, he was checking to make sure I was a legitimate citizen and not involved in this. Then he said, but when criminals do this, they have some of your financial information and so forth. Who knows how they get this? Our records are out there. You know this, all of you. And so the procedure that he told me to follow was to let the U.S. government hold some of my finances to protect the criminals from taking my money, pulling it from me. I fell for this line, hook, line, and sinker. I didn't realize this man was not to be trusted. The one thing that I have learned out of this, and we'll talk about more later, is that he asked me to keep it in confidence. Don't tell anybody, because it will compromise the case as we are gathering information about this drug ring. And so I participated. Not being accustomed to sharing financial decisions with my family, my girls are spread across the world, as you know, one on either coast, and then Peggy and Gary in Papua New Guinea for their mission work. So I didn't tell anybody in the family because I'd been asked to keep it quiet. I began to send packets of cash to U.S. designated lawyer agents. I was hooked into the scheme. This all fell apart in mid-September, after considerable loss, when two St. Louis police officers, drug officers, showed up on my doorstep asking if I'd recently sent a package to such and such a city in California, naming the amount spent and so forth. I said yes. And they said, Mrs. Ewalt, we're sorry to tell you, you've been being scammed. Oh, I just felt so foolish. I was embarrassed, victimized. How could I have fallen for such a lie? I am a very trusting person, however. So soon as this was revealed, I needed to start telling my family, the 2 banks I do business with,
Yeah.
and even my financial manager, because I had pulled sums out of these various accounts and sent the money, cash money, sealed in packages to the places where these lawyers were putting it in, picking it up and putting it in my designated account to return to me when all this mess got solved. I felt guilty in not asking the Lord for more discernment along for the way. For the lies I told regarding how I was using the cash by this fake officer. Well, what have I learned about protecting myself and perhaps some of you others? My objective is to prevent any of you from being scammed. If anyone asks for money and tells you to keep it quiet and tell no one, be suspicious. Say, I have to discuss this with a family member before I participate in this. That kind of a question would have really triggered my suspicions. I did talk to my family and with tears and, Mom, why didn't you tell us? Well, I'm single. I have financial managers, but I talked to them and told them the lies that I had been told about why I was requesting cash. I had passed these lies along. And I wanted to apologize to them for lying to them. The bank also was very good about asking questions, but they didn't, any of them, ask about the question, is anybody asking you to keep this secret? And that was the thing. I did go to the banks and my financial managers and talk to them about this. I said, this would be very helpful if this question was added to the fine questioning that you do, because you are trained and ask good questions about how are you using this money? Why do you need it in cash instead of a cashier's check? Do you know this person that you're dealing? Yes. Well, it's my nephew, and he's having an issue about this or that. And so this is what happened to me, and I just wanted to relate this because it's such an evil thing to have been perpetrated. And I know a lot of people, especially the elderly, are getting victimized in this way. And I don't want it to happen to anybody. So that's my story, Taylor.
I think that's amazing, and thank you so much for sharing that. I think one of the things that can happen is if something like this happens to you, it's so difficult to share it or say anything because you don't want to look dumb or you don't want to embarrassed in any way. And I think it's really thoughtful of you to say, despite that fear, I'm still going to share this because I know it can help out our church members and help out people, even if it just helps out one or two, because you're just as much as a victim as anyone else, and
Yeah.
people taking advantage of that, and that's really, really difficult, and I'm really sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm mighty sorry too.
Mm.
It was some of the extra money. My financial advisors did not let me pull anything of my monthly money that sustains me.
Yeah.
They were wise in that way. But
So if there are people in the church that might say, oh my gosh, what else? Obviously, this is a short little video, but if there's other ways that they can be thoughtful in preparing for something like this, if it does happen to them, how can they get in touch with you? What are ways? Can they just come find you at church and say, hey, Judy, I'd love to sit down and talk?
Right. Maybe not after worship on Sunday
Okay,
morning.
not on
but
worship on Sunday.
They can call me.
Video call, okay.
Or so forth, and say, Judy, I'd like to ask you a couple questions,
yeah.
about this. Do you know, Taylor, that in sharing my story with about a half a dozen personal,
People, yeah.
trustworthy friends here, that two of them related that they had been scammed. One was a couple and one was a single. But they have never told anybody outside their family.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Judy, for sharing this. And we hope that you might find this helpful and Judy's story is helpful. And we appreciate your story and your willingness to tell it.
Thank you for letting me bare my soul.
Thanks, Judy.